started on time, but please excuse those who are still going to be arriving. First, let me start by welcoming all of you. My name is Dr. Karen Lee, and I'm the Wellness Coordinator for the school district. I'm going on my 6th year here, and I'm really excited for today. The reason I'm so excited is because not only are all of you able to make it today, but we have followed this very interesting journey through addressing mental health issues in our district. And today, as you probably know, the theme of the professional development is mental health. And this is for the entire school district. So you are a concentrated group of folks here who are going to do some intensive work. We also have all of our site staff doing mental health work today as well. So it's a district-wide PD. I'm so excited that this is happening. And I just briefly want to walk you through the history of how mental health kind of evolved since I've seen it here. Before I do that, I just want to quickly point out that all of you should have a program brochure. In there is some important information, so make sure you've got that. There will be an evaluation by SurveyMonkey. I'll post the link at the end of the first session and second session. We will have some written evaluation forms for the subjective comments, so I'd like to have those filled out as well at the end of the morning and afternoon sessions. Each of you should have a laptop or a Chromebook. Is there anyone who doesn't have that? Okay. So if you don't have a Chromebook or a laptop, then at the break, we'll make sure that you get my little card over here. Make sure you sign it out. Some of you needed earphones for the training that we're going to be doing at 11 o'clock today. I think we're running low on earphones, so we're trying to round up some more from our technology folks. Yeah. Excellent, excellent. Thanks, Tina. And so that's an online training that you'll all get to do at 11 o'clock today. So those are just kind of logistical things. We do have this breakfast set up here. I apologize, it's not as healthy as I would like it to be. But we will have lunch served in Cypress here after our morning session, and then we'll reconvene for the afternoon here. You're going to be doing a lot of moving around today. We have some breakout sessions planned for you at 10 o'clock. And so just quickly I'll announce that MA and Carlmont will be in this room. Sequoia will be in Maple. And Woodside, Redwood, and EPAA will report to Mahogany at 10 o'clock. Okay? And we'll explain those activities when we get into the small groups. But I'll just quickly run through a timeline, and then I'll introduce our second group. Okay? So I'm sorry, it's kind of on the sidewalk here, but we started with what's called the MAC, the Mental Health Advisory Committee. And that group of special people really set the foundation for the work that we're doing here today. And I'd like to introduce a few of them that have made it here already. And then from the Mental Health Advisory Committee, the Mental Health Task Force was formed at the board level and superintendent level. And that happened this past spring, and we had a lot of great work done there. And again, our superintendent was helping to lead that effort, and out of that grew things like the Green Folder Initiative that many of you now are familiar with, and the Cognito training that you're going to be doing today, right? And then we now have the Mental Health Coordinators group, and that's the extension of the task force. And we're going to continue to meet every month to discuss all aspects of mental health. We're also collaborating with our guidance counselors and our nurses and health aides, so it's really a big collaborative effort, as well as with our community partners. So it's a huge effort now. So at this level now, we're now at this special PD day, and I'm just really happy and excited to have you folks here, and for you to carry the knowledge that you learned from today back to your school sites, all right? So with that, before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to, all of you know Jackie McAvoy. She's our Assistant Superintendent of HR and Student Services, and she'd like to say a few words today.
So first I'd like to welcome you all here. It's always great at the beginning of a new semester to see people come in, they're hugging, they're saying hello, even though it's only been a couple of weeks that we've been off. I think that a lot of us have been rejuvenated with that kind of time. One of the things that I wanted to emphasize today, and this opportunity is a really good one for me to speak to this, is that you've been working on mental health. There's another task force in this district which is called the Discipline Task Force. And under Student Services, there's an umbrella under Student Services, and people think of it as student discipline. And there's actually a couple of people here that are on that task force. I think of it as student behavior. And there are all of these overlaps that are now coming, we're beginning to see between student mental health, student behavior, how we respond to students when they're not doing what they need to be doing, and how does that all come together for us so we can maximize student learning. Because here's what I know. I've been in this business for 40 years. I know that you cannot maximize student learning if students do not feel emotionally and physically safe. That's just the reality. And so when a student comes to school and they don't feel safe, for whatever reason, and sometimes there are some real reasons, and sometimes there are reasons that we have to help them discover, they're not going to be able to learn at the level we would like them to. They're not going to be able to maximize their learning. All of this is interrelated. So when we talk about student behavior, we're really talking about school culture. We're really talking about what happens in the classroom. We're really talking about how administration is going to respond to student behavior to support student learning. Because in the end, that's what it's really about. It's about student learning and making sure that they have a pathway through high school and they have a plan for what they're going to be doing when they leave us. And those things are critically important to me. My background is varied. I have run the court in community schools, been a continuation high school principal. I have been the principal of Palo Alto High School, which is one of the top performing high schools in the nation. So I've seen that spectrum of students. I've seen that spectrum of success. And it always goes back to school culture. It always goes back to that emotional and physical safety that students need to feel. We are in challenging times. And when there are challenging times, that's when we really have to become more focused on the affective side of the house as far as I'm concerned with schools. And when I started 40 years ago, even 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, we didn't talk about student mental health. That was somebody else's business. It wasn't the school's business. It was county mental health. It was the doctor's business. It was someone else's business. Well, it is our business because it really speaks to students' ability to learn. Now, one of the things that Karen always says to me is that I'm not really good at tooting my own horn. When you look at this list over here, this woman standing right here is the person that has really facilitated that in this district. She's a real advocate for both emotional and physical safety of our students. So I really want to point that out because she's not going to do it. She said she could do it. So today, you're going to be hearing information on multi-tiered system of support, which is like this long, some people call it RTI, there's a pyramid of interventions. There's academic interventions and there are behavioral interventions. And those two things really do come together. And I think you're going to be hearing a lot about that, about school culture, about those interventions, and how do we create that climate in a school that really facilitates learning for all of our students. So I'm excited about this. I have to run off in a little bit over to Carmont to see how they're doing. But I'm excited about this. Cognito, it's amazing. I had an opportunity at a conference to share with someone who is actually a leader in MTSS that we were doing as a district, Cognito. And he goes, well, I'll paraphrase, how the heck did you get that to happen district-wide? And he said, because it's a focus of our district. It's a focus from the board to the superintendent that's filtered down throughout the district. Because it's very rare that a district makes that kind of commitment that we've made today to have everyone in the district access that program and learn a little bit more about student mental health. So have a great day. I think it's going to be really, really exciting. I don't know if I'll be back for the cannabis discussion this afternoon. That should be an interesting one as well. So, given changes in the law, under student services, we're going to have to deal with that one. So, but have a really great day, and I'm hoping that this goes really, really, really well today and filters out throughout our district. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. And then we have a very special program for you. Before we jump into that, I just quickly want to introduce some of our mental health coordinators that are in the room. We've got Judy Romero here. We have Shelley Bustamante. We've got MJ Flockhart from EPAA. Lauren Carson from Redwood. And Mickey Cristerna from MA is stuck in floods and traffic, so she's going to be here shortly. And Sarah Grace Vaughn could not join us today. But I want to introduce Jenee Bratton. She's been taking care of this and helped organize the days of today and has been a key player in all of this. So with that, I'm going to have our speaker come to the podium. Jenee Littrell, you can read her amazing bio in here. I'm going to let you read that. But I just want to say to you that 18 months ago when Jenee came to our county office of ed, we were ecstatic. And she comes to us from San Diego, extensive experience. She's our Safe and Supportive Schools director at the county level. And we're very fortunate to have her here. I would say you're probably one of the state's experts now in MTSS. And
that list is growing, so I don't know.
yeah, but we're lucky you're right. We're lucky you're here in our backyard. So with that, I'm going to let her jump into her presentation and enjoy the day.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for being here. And can I just say, well, first of all, as Karen just mentioned, I'm from San Diego. And the last district I came from was a high school district of 20,000. It was a union, the high school union district. And I started as a counselor there and evolved into overseeing all the mental health services. So I feel like I'm with my people and I feel like I'm in my place. And so I really am excited personally for today. And I thank you for spending the next hour and a half with me. But I also want to say that as I do this work, both around Southern California and now up here in Northern California, to have the vision just stated, as you heard from both Jackie and Karen, about the whole child and what you know students need, and to have your districts make the commitment that they have, I really feel like you're really in a good place, and I'm excited to work with your district and work with you as we continue to expand what's happening. And as Jackie talked about, so mental health oftentimes gets talked about here, and then it doesn't get connected to the staff or the students or the discipline or the behavior. So that's what's really exciting about today and the work you're doing and the work we're going to do today. And I know many of you did homework in advance, so thank you for that, because we will be pulling that homework out and bringing it to life. And so really the way I'm going to start is just talking about multi-tiered systems of support. And as Jackie, it is a long, so we're going to call it MTSS. How many of you have heard of MTSS? Okay. How many of you feel really confident about your understanding of MTSS? Great. So most of you, the hands didn't go up, so I'm going to try to differentiate and engage everybody, whether you're that hand that was up at the end or the hand never went up. And I'm just going to kind of normalize that regardless of whether you raise your hand or not, this is an evolving initiative. There's a lot of narrative and there's a lot of dialogue happening around the country, and so this term gets used a lot. And so in that, oftentimes there's confusing or mixed messages. The state of California in the last 9 months came out with its official definition, and out of that they said, because every state likes to have their own definition for MTSS, so that really helps get consistency across the nation. But California now has our own definition, and what they've done is the governor came out with a huge chunk of funds, significant chunk of funds, and said we want eventually every school in the nation, or every school in the state, to be doing MTSS. Now, of course, under LCFF and local control, they can't mandate that, but they're incentivizing it, and they're recognizing that if we do MTSS well, we can close the achievement gap. We can support all students. We can actually absolutely increase our staff morale. And I'm going to talk about that, and so those things seem like they're not connected. Obviously, you know they are, but there's a lot that can be accomplished, and it has to be done with fidelity and a lot of work. But the good thing is that there is a model, and it's well researched across the nation, that if we do this work well, we will get to all those goals and outcomes that we're shooting for. So, you're going to kind of have the latest and greatest information on MTSS, because what they're doing at the state level is they're asking each region, County Office of Ed, so we're Region 4, to coordinate all of our local other County Office of Eds, and then we are partnering together to get what they're calling knowledge development sites. So local schools that raise their hand and say, we want to do this. So I happen to be the head MTSS person for Region 4, which kind of just means I'm the conduit between the state and the other COEs and the school sites. But that also ensures that we always have the latest and greatest information coming from the state, and I'm going to share that with you today. And you're actually the first group to get this presentation, so yay, Sequoia. I think it kind of speaks to the work that you've already done, the fact that you've done this, you're ready for this. So I'm excited to do this, but I know we're on a tight timeline and I want to get going. So, I also want to introduce Molly. She's not my assistant, she's my partner. Molly Hendricks, many of you know her. She's been out to school sites doing a lot of different types of work, and most recently she's been out delivering suicide prevention posters, and so some of you have had her at your school site. She's the BHRS Crisis Collaborative or Crisis Coordinator. She has actually 5 C's in her title, so we condense it to Crisis Coordinator. But we partner together, and she's here today to help, and she's actually my slide advancer. So in our time this morning, we're going to help define MTSS and the core elements. We're going to hopefully start moving towards a one system approach. We're going to map current interventions and gaps. Actually, you guys already did that. We're going to provide resources, and we're going to identify the next steps. So before you is the kind of statewide model of how they see MTSS. So on the left, you see MTSS addresses academic, behavioral, and social emotional learning in a fully integrated system of support. On the right side, so many of you are going, oh really, it's just another kind of way to talk about the pyramid, right? So you can see that but the reality is it's all those areas. Oftentimes, historically, we get just focused on the academics, or just focused on this area, but it's bringing it together, the social emotional, so hopefully our behavioral outcomes will improve, as well as our academic outcomes. Then on the right, it's for all students who get core supports, academic and behavioral, and when that doesn't work, when every student is not performing to their best ability at that level, then some students get additional supports or supplemental supports. And then what we do know is we still have some students that are going to need more than that. So at the very top, there's a few students that get individualized supports. This is really important though, sorry Molly, this is really important because remember all, some, and few. Those are key words to hold on to, all, some, and few. Now you can go, thank you. And then this is kind of the broad way to kind of bring it together in a context. The MTSS is the umbrella. If everything is coming together, it's the umbrella of how we do work in schools. Under that, you'll see the 3 circles. The whole child is the word that you can't see very well in the middle, the yellow part. And it's academic, behavior, and social emotional. So this is a nice visual for us to be reminded that the work we're doing is about that whole child, but it takes a whole system. So really, it is about doing the work that you're doing every day, but making sure it's connected in a systematic, coherent fashion. Do you feel like that's happening now? Systematically? Yeah. But don't worry, because you're not the only school district. In fact, very few school districts could say, yes, that's happening now. So I'm really excited to start this journey and continue it, or not to start it, but to pop in this portion of it and to work with you guys as you're developing this. So the SUMS provides evidence-based, and so the California SUMS basically is statewide MTSS rollout. That's what that sounds for. So California SUMS provides an evidence-based, integrated, multi-tiered system of support that guarantees all students are all students an equitable, inclusive education focused on the whole child. So that's the state definition now.
That's nice.
Yeah. Okay, so what this means for you, as we're going through these slides, the things I want you to think about is I want you to think about what you guys are doing at your school site, either literally you or your partners, academic or behavioral, and I want you to be thinking, what is right? What is useful, successful, uniquely good, or alive that we can build on? So in other words, what's working on your campus? Maybe you have an amazing support group, and the students that get in that intervention do really, really well, and it's really meeting that need. Maybe you do an amazing academic support program. Maybe you do an amazing orientation for students. Whatever your site is doing that you feel really good about, chances are that we need more, right? Chances are we're not serving enough of those students. But there's a lot that you're already doing that we need to be keeping in our mind, because this is all very strengths-based. It's very easy to go, yeah, but we're not getting every kid, and we still have kids that are falling down, falling through the cracks. This system will eventually get us there, but so much of the work you're doing is working now. So it's about recognizing that, and then extrapolating that work to other potential interventions. And then what existing assets and resources can we build on? So you already heard from Karen and Jackie that there's already other groups happening. There's already resources that are invested. Many of you are part of those dialogues. So the MTSS will be bringing all that work and initiatives together. What are our bright spots of practice again? What are you guys doing well? And how can we amplify what already works? So those are kind of, remember all, what are they? All, some, few. And then these are the questions to kind of keep in mind as we move forward. Any questions? Please feel free to raise your hand and ask questions along the way. Okay, we're all here? All right, so here's the official state definition. Multi-tiered is a prevention-based framework. Do we do a lot of prevention in education? No. Do we do a lot of prevention in general? Why don't you think we do enough prevention? Resources, timing. What else? Why don't we do enough prevention work, kind of just as education field? Why aren't we really big into prevention?
We don't perceive the risks that are out there.
Okay, so sometimes we're missing the fact that there's risk, and so we don't know what we're preventing. We don't know there's something to prevent, right? And what else? Why aren't we doing more prevention in education? Sorry?
Priorities.
Priorities?
Budget, we don't have, not knowing necessarily what to address, and then investing money, well, it's really expensive.
Right. Resources, priorities. Yes. So what we know is that prevention is hard to justify, right? Because it's hard to quantify this work prevented something, right? And because education already doesn't have enough resources, it's really hard to take the few resources and put them here to be proactive and preventative when we have all these other things that we need to address right now. We don't have the luxury often to prevent that. That oftentimes means that all of us on the front line are running from fire to fire, or crisis to crisis, or broken situation to broken situation, and we're trying our best, and we're often going home really exhausted, really burnt out, really fried, often, not every day fortunately. But the point is that this allows the framework, and to have the state of California kind of start to change the narrative with districts, starts to allow for a lot more preventative mentality, kind of thoughts and shifts towards what we need to be preventing. It's team driven, it's based on data. We're going to talk a little bit more about data shortly. For improving the outcomes of every student through family, school, and community partnering. So Karen had mentioned that we're doing some work broader than just Sequoia District. We're doing work with the client districts that feed into your district. We're starting to engage in dialogues. How do we take students that are off track already in the middle school years, or maybe are already getting some services, mental health or social emotional supports, and how do we successfully transition those students to you guys? so that you're not starting over. You're not trying to meet a 14-year-old student who already has 14 years of schooling, or 14 years of living, and numerous years of schooling, and then we're starting over, right? So how do we really get coherent and cohesive across our systems? We're starting to have those dialogue with your client districts, and many of you will be invited to join those dialogues as we evolve them. But the other exciting thing is, like, Molly is a very good example of a community resource. Oftentimes in schools, we think about what we have here on my school site, or maybe my district. Really, we should be thinking more holistically as a community. And so bringing those resources closer to your students, to you, will help ensure more success for all the students all year round. And then it's a layered continuum, it's evidence-based, and it's applied at the classroom, the school, the district, region, and state level. So all the different levels. In other words, it's a shift of how we do business. Does that sound like it's a good shift based on where you're sitting and what you experience and your challenges? Okay, perfect. So the advantage of MTSS is it provides instructional behavioral assistance in a timely fashion. So that's also a shift, because oftentimes if we have classes or an intervention, oftentimes they fill up quickly. Sorry, we can only enroll X amount of students in this class. We don't have enough to open another offering, right? You guys ever experienced that? Or we only, we have this intervention, but we're waitlisted now. We have too many students and we can't serve them all. So that's, however, one of the big premises of MTSS is it's recognizing that we have to ensure that what we're doing is the most impactful. And so it's about kind of being brave enough to go, this is what we're doing well. This is how we can expand what we're doing well to serve more kids, to support more students and staff. And it's also recognizing we've always done this. You know how we started doing this? No? I don't know. I think it was a principal 3 principles ago. That was a pet project, or, right? Anybody, right? So those kind of cultural carryovers. And so then we keep doing things that we've done and we never really push pause and think, is that meeting a need? Is it meeting the need at the best that we can? Is it still a need, right? And so if it's not, it's having the courage and having the space to kind of explore that and talk about it. And if it's not, take it off the plate. Because oftentimes we're stretched doing things because we've always done them. So it is general ed and special ed. It's academic and behavioral. You guys are familiar with RTI? Yeah? So I also want to normalize that many of you, the narrative and the conversations that have been happening in the field have been confusing because it has continued to evolve. And so it started as RTI, right? So response to intervention. And then they recognized, wait, that's only about academics. What about behavior? So then you kind of got RTI plus PBIS. Then you kind of got RTI squared, right? Well, it just kept evolving. The professionals, both at the state and the federal level, said, you know what? Those are all really important learning processes that we went through, but it's still not systemic. It never got holistic and coherent, and it never really, kind of brought a whole system together. So they took the good parts of that, they brought in the big brains and the researchers, and what they figured out and what they've done over the last 10 to 15 years with schools is really kind of brought that coherent system together, which is now called MTSS. So it's not just a new name, okay? It's actually a systemic approach to do some of that old work. It's school-wide and it's individual, and ideally it's going to include multiple funding sources. So it's not just this person's job or this department's job, because it's all of us working coherently to bring supports together. There's core elements, but in the interest of, so I'll just quickly talk about that, but this might be something we explore more in the future. Shared leadership. And I recognize that you guys have your own role, your own influence, your own ability, but there's a lot of other pots of folks that need to be on the same page. So I also want to say that this conversation is not just happening today, it's not just happening with you guys. It needs to get to, and your leadership has talked about getting it to the other groups, to your administrators, to your teachers, to other groups, because we need to create that whole team approach. It's not just your responsibility to do MTSS. Data-based problem solving. layered continuum of supports, evidence-based instruction and intervention and assessment, universal screening, and family and school partnering. Those are all the elements that need to be in place. So eventually, maybe our work will get to the point where we're really exploring how well these components are in place in our school site or in our district. But today, it's just kind of the overview. You can go past that. So I know we're kind of, we have 25 more minutes and I really want to get to the meat of this. So this is the future site. So how many of you guys collectively, how many of your school sites are collecting data regarding behavior on a regular basis? Every site's collecting what? Discipline referrals? So attendance, discipline, I'm sorry?
Mental health referrals.
Mental health referrals that are completed by whom?
Completed, meaning like, who's the person providing the support, is that a question?
Who makes the referral? So
Oh,
who?
yes, that, the teachers, parents, students, or administration.
So your whole school can recognize that a student may be in need of support and they'll fill out a referral and then that's collected.
Yeah.
Is that happening at every school site?
Yes.
Okay. Do you still have students on your school site that are identified in other ways that aren't, a referral hasn't been made on? How are you finding those students? Teachers?
Self-referral.
I'm sorry?
Self-referral.
Self-referral? What were you saying?
Secretary.
Secretaries? Okay, so other staff that recognize that there's something that the student might need, right? So, but it's still not coming in a paper form. What else? How else are you finding students that need additional supports? Disciplinary referrals, I'm sorry? Health office?
Outside agencies, parents.
Outside agencies, okay, so communication from outside and parents.
Yeah, we have meetings and we discuss students just out loud on a weekly basis.
Okay, so you have like a care team that comes together with a group of folks and you discuss students.
Right.
And so sometimes a student will come up in that discussion that hasn't been identified in any of those other systems. Perfect. Any other way? Those are all being. I'm sorry? Crisis. What? You don't see crisis coming? Right. So all of these different ways we become aware of students. Do you think you still have students on your campus that are in need and crisis that we don't know?
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
Because students many times keep it to themselves and they don't misbehave, so they may be depressed, sad, but they don't make trouble in the classroom, and so nobody,
Right, so it's more internalizing. No one outside would really recognize it. And I know your cognito training will help later today about recognizing signs that aren't getting discipline referrals and aren't walking into health offices or aren't getting parent, referrals.
Sometimes their choices could actually get them disciplined, so they won't mention their choices.
Can you elaborate a little?
Drug behaviors,
Okay.
maybe a student is using something and they're not going to come to us to report because they know it's just gonna start a cascade where they're gonna get in trouble.
Okay, so you might get other indicators that a student's off track. And what I'm hearing you say is there's some underlying root cause. And the student isn't raising their hand and saying, yeah, but I got busted for this because this is really going on, right? And how, not to be critical and not to point out any names, how solid do you feel it is right now where administrators or whomever are recognizing those discipline or those behavioral actions as possibly need for additional supports? 50-50, yes? Okay.
More so.
More so, all right. Yeah.
Well, I just think that I would imagine that administrators see that there's absolutely a need, but the ability to service that need is the problem.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing you say is administrators oftentimes will see that there's a need, but there isn't the ability or the resource,
Resource,
Or the time.
ability, time.
Staff.
Name
to
it.
address that need, right? And there is the sweet spot of where we need to do a lot of our work, right? We need to make sure that our systems, our processes are recognizing kind of the root causes and what students are needing, both in the preventative way, So what does our data tell us? What do our referrals tell us? What do we know is happening? How do we make sure that the interventions that we're using are effective? That they're making a difference, that every single student who needs that resource or intervention is getting that intervention to the best of our ability. How can we do better screenings? How can we proactively identify when a student's in need, especially because he or she might be internalizing? And so how do we do all this proactively and preventative? And then when we have students that still, still give us their gifts of behavior, how do we recognize what needs to happen to support that student? So basically, what I'm hearing you say is you have all the pieces to the pie, and now it's just about bringing them together in a very coordinated, cohesive manner. Right? Do you still feel like you have students in need that are not being successful and maybe detaching from school, not completing, not graduating? So we still have students that we need to help.
The people who deal with the discipline are not here.
Right. Right. No, you're right. The people who deal with the discipline are not here, and that's why I was saying, don't worry, you guys, this is not just on your shoulders. We recognize that other folks, that there's other roles that definitely need to be part of this conversation, and eventually the conversation needs to come together, okay? So it is the beginning, but we know that you guys are not the only MTSS carriers on your campus. In fact, that's opposite to the MTSS vision, right?
I was gonna add that you have students who are successful that still have needs, who are academically
Right.
successful, that have internalized a lot of the needs when you start to, talk and, whether it's a teacher or counselor, they'll share kind of what their experience at home was.
Yeah.
And they're really successful at school, so they're almost invisible.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to that one, because yes, we definitely have those students as well. Go ahead. Go ahead. So we kind of did this a little bit. What data does your school currently access and collect? And we know one of the things that we're starting to engage with one of your client districts is how do we kind of systematically carry over the data from the middle schools into the high schools so kids aren't getting dropped because our systems are not ready to, kind of transition those students to the best of the ability. So the other part of MTSS is it's recognizing where are we as adults or our systems limited in meeting the students' needs, and what can we do to address that. So oftentimes, just as an example, oftentimes HIPAA, FERPA, how do I communicate, who can I share what with? I know many of you folks in the room deal with that. Well, we are working at the county office of ed level to make sure that's very clear. How can we legally share relevant information so that students don't fall through cracks? How do we make sure that we can have the most timely information so you're not doing a cum dive because the student's, failing miserably, and then you find all these things that happened 3 or 4 years ago that would have really helped you been more proactive and preventative, right? So we're working hard to kind of bring that system up to speed with what we know the students need. So here's that part that I think is really, really important. So instead of all, it says every, okay? So all students receive universal supports. Here's another misnomer that's kind of come out of the field that MTSS is working to create. Basically, it comes down to a lot of folks will list interventions because in the old RTI world, it used to be just list all the interventions available. MTSS is more about list every intervention that a student gets. So at that all level, you can only say that it's a tier 1 if every single student gets it. So, a beginning of the year assembly about behavioral expectations. That's something that every student gets on that campus. That would be something you would put as a tier 1. If every student has the ability to access a mental health provider on campus, oftentimes in schools we're tempted to put that in a tier 1 because it's available to everybody. But that's not, MTSS is shifting that conversation. And why it's shifting the conversation is we need to make sure our tier 1s are very robust. In schools, historically, we felt really, really good because we had all these things available. But when you look at who's accessing it versus the need, and versus the system or the coherent part of it, that's not happening. So that's a whole shift for us. Well, that's a whole bunch of work for us to look at, which we'll spend more time doing. And then, and back to your comment in the back, like some students are doing well academically, and this is not a new way to label kids, right? So this is not like we start walking down the halls and say, oh, that's a tier 2 kid, that's a tier 3 kid. This is not a new way to label kids. This is a way to recognize that some students might be thriving academically, but really struggling in certain other areas. Or they might be on no radar, attending school every day, somewhat passing classes, right? But they're actually in need of stuff that we're not identifying. So it's basically somehow bringing it all together so it's coordinated. Then the next level is targeted. So back to my example. So if I'm a student that needs some social skills, that might be something available on my campus. I'm still going to have all my tier 1 supports, and then I'm going to get my social skills targeted intervention. Okay? This is also a shift. Oftentimes we've popped kids into different components at the tier 2 or tier 3 without ensuring that they've also had their tier 1s, or sometimes we pop up to tier 3 without making sure they're solid tier 2s. So I don't know, I honestly don't know because I haven't been working in your district as much as I have in other areas. But I can tell you that there's a local district that's taking on mental health, it's not you guys, really aggressively this year. And they brought in a whole team, you guys probably know who I'm talking about. They brought in a whole team to do some mental health services this year. Immediately they found their referrals are off the charts. Well, that district is starting to do some MTSS work, and it's because there's no tier 2s. So it's basically like, hey student, welcome to this high school. Oh, I'm seeing you're struggling, I'm gonna make a referral to the mental health person. And then all of a sudden, that mental health person no longer has openings. Anybody relate to this? So not hypothetically. But it's the tier 2 parts that need to, it's really solid tier 1s, and then it's the solid tier 2s that need to get strengthened. That's why this work is a coherent process. That's why we have to make sure it is. And then few students. So here's the other thing. That district is struggling with, is mental health a tier 2 or tier 3? It's both. Can you describe why?
Because just growing up at home, whether there's some level of dysfunction or a lot of level of dysfunction, you have a lot of issues and things that are going on in your life that if you get help and support, it will help you. But some people have, suffered severe trauma, so maybe kids that need some level of support could do it in group work, but so group therapy could work very well for them, just to normalize how they feel, family systems, and how to overcome that versus individualized, intense therapeutic services that they need.
Perfect. So a student might get help in a support group, and that would be a tier 2, because it's not individualized. It's with other students, right? And that's a lower kind of, it's considered the targeted because it's the tier 2, and so you can get multiple students in there. It's less restrictive as an intervention. And then you might still need some individual therapy, and that same student still might need both, right? So it's not either or, it's both and often. If we have the ability to have enough of the resources and interventions, and I know what it's like to be on a school site where it's like, but this is all I have. Right? And so I keep making referrals, and I know she has 30 people on her waiting list, but that's all I have. And I know what that feels like, and it doesn't feel good.
Wouldn't tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 depend on your student population?